Good evening, and welcome to another infrequent edition of the program, What Do You Think? My name is Bill Morse, and sharing this space with me is Oliver. A couple of housekeeping items. If you're of age to vote and you are registered to vote, if you haven't registered to vote, please consider doing so. We here in Vermont are having a state primary on Tuesday, August 9th, in which you can vote for your favorite candidate according to the party with which you're registered. So if you are registered as a Democrat, you can select a Democratic candidate to run for different offices, be they governor, lieutenant governor, your local representative, your local state senator, our congressperson. Vermont has one member of Congress to represent us, and one senator, as Patrick Leahy is leaving his spot and is retiring after 1978. So we're talking about over 45 years as a senator representing Vermont and mostly elsewhere in the Senate. So I wanted to talk originally about the World Economic Forum's 2030 agenda, why it's important for us to realize what's on this agenda, how pieces of this agenda are falling into place. You may recall that in late May we talked about the World Economic Forum meeting in person in Davos, Switzerland. And the head of the World Economic Forum is Klaus Schwab, a financier and a very wealthy man. Speaking of Patrick Leahy was in attendance at the World Economic Forum in Davos, as well as a number of other senators and congressmen. I believe one mayor and one governor also attended the World Economic Forum. But I'm going to put that discussion off for 1 week. I will be back next week, and we will discuss the Agenda 2030, the goals that the World Economic Forum has set for the world in their discussions, yearly discussions, and also their planning stages between discussions at Davos. And I believe we should pay heed to what they are planning because our elected leaders are taking part in the discussions. And not always do we hear what the discussions are unless we follow directly on YouTube the conferences, which are available if you are interested, looking up World Economic Forum Davos 2022, and again, the conference was in person this year, the third week, I believe, of May. And it's interesting. I would recommend, if you have the time and hopefully the interest, to hear the various discussions from world leaders, as well as our elected leaders here in the United States, and certainly Senator Leahy, who has been representing us and others in the Senate. So that's for next week. This week, I came upon a newspaper article in the Commons, and here is the Commons from yesterday, July 13th, 2022. And when I get a chance, I like to look at this paper because of the different articles and regarding current events, the calendar, and also the human interest stories. And today I wanted to discuss an article written by Kevin O'Connor from, this article was originally written for the Vermont Digger, which is an online newspaper, vermontdigger.org, VT, as in Vermont, vtdigger.org. And I think I've written to Kevin because I had his email address, and I gave him, as well as others, a heads up as to our discussion this evening of this article regarding Vermont teens confront a polarized world. And there's a picture here of teenagers marching in the Brattleboro 4th of July parade this year. And it says students from the Governor's Institute on Global Issues and Youth Action march in Brattleboro's 4th of July parade. And I'm looking at the signs, and one sign says, "Guns are for weirdos." Another sign says, "Trans something are rights." And then another one about respect existence or expect resistance. And existence, of course, well, not of course, but the word existence is colored in rainbow colors. And they're going down this part of the parade. These young people or teenagers are going down Main Street. I'm going to read Kevin O'Connor's article and perhaps just supply a few comments. I think it's an important article in that it expresses a perception that is guiding not only state policy, local policy in many instances, certainly in places like Brattleboro, Montpelier, Burlington, etc., but also a perception that's guiding not only U.S. policy, but policy in other what is called liberal democracies, the UK, Germany, France, Spain, other places that Scandinavia, Australia. And so I think it's important to read and discuss this perspective and how it affects the entire population and not just the scope of the issues that these teens are bringing awareness to through these signs and this marching. So, Vermont teens confront a polarized world. That is the title of the article. Attendees at annual Governor's Institute on Global Issues and Youth Action wrestled with the age-old dilemma: can they and should they learn to love their enemy? Love their enemy. There's a misprint. It says love the enemy. It should be love their enemy. This was the title either from the writer or from the Vermont Digger. Sometimes the writer does not choose the title. It's the editor of the publication that chooses the title and the little sound bite that hopefully will get people to read the article. Putney. For 3 decades, Vermont teenagers have gathered at the annual Governor's Institute on Global Issues and Youth Action to talk about hot topics ranging from abortion to zero tolerance policies. I imagine that zero tolerance is drug or perhaps bullying. I'm not sure. There are a number of zero tolerance policies out there. Even so, some didn't know how to respond to visiting scholar Amer Latif's recent speech titled, "Love My Enemy." Seriously? It's much easier to say, look at what they've done. We need to take those people down, Latif admitted. But what kind of interactions are possible with those that we disagree with? The former Marlborough College professor spoke to an audience of 60 high schoolers, all too familiar with a world of increasing political polarization. That's why organizers of the nonprofit institute hosted him as part of their week-long educational enrichment program at Landmark College in Putney. How can we find a way to respect each other as human beings so we can move forward together, said John Ungerleider. I'm pronouncing that as if I were German. Ungerleider, the program's director. I think it's a hard question for all of us, and not just for students. The last time the Institute met in person was in 2019. I'm assuming because of the 2-year pandemic and the lockdowns or the change in meeting policies. Donald Trump was president, and Roe versus Wade was law of the land. 3 pandemic years later, much has changed, yet much also remains turbulently similar. Latif said that many believe others are the root of the problem. He instead pointed to something else. Where is that feeling, he asked students of their indignation. It's not in the other person. That indignation is in you. Latif used examples from ancient religion and modern science to pull back from individual issues to a bigger picture of the world and its ultimate interdependence. But the challenges of encouraging everyone to comprehend that and cooperate were seen throughout the Institute's schedule, which featured staffers who recently fled from Afghanistan, as well as a video call with speakers in war-torn Ukraine. We need to work for the right thing, Latif said, but we also need to recognize there's a better way of being than what leads to violence. The solution? The professor suggested acting like soccer stars. Both teams play like everything depends on it. Yet at the end, people that you've shoved and pushed and taken down want to help others get up and shake hands. Can we say that about our enemies, he said, or asked. That life is bigger than just the issue we're interested in. That people are bigger than the view they hold. Latif encouraged students to speak out for their positions without attacking those who hold opposing views. You engage with the action, he said, but you don't judge the other person. Understanding and strategy. The Governor's Institute on Global Issues and Youth Action is one of 9 programs. Others include the arts, astronomy, engineering, entrepreneurship, environmental science, health and medicine, mathematics and technology that take place every summer at college campuses statewide. We want students to understand what the issues are, Ungerleider said, and to develop a strategy for action. Sorry, Oliver. Develop a strategy for action. Teams aim to do that by creating protest signs to display in Brattleboro's 4th of July parade. Spectators greeted them with cheers and a few cries of opposition. I'm not saying that this is easy, but possibilities exist, Latif said. Perhaps there's a way to be able to talk to people whose positions we detest, so hopefully they will listen. Well, that last quote kind of stuck with me. I'm going to repeat it. Perhaps there's a way to be able to talk to people. Talk to people or talk with people. There's a big difference. I talk with you about this. I don't talk to you. If I talk to you, I'm broadcasting. I'm not receiving. I'm transmitting with the receipt on mute. So perhaps there's a way to be able to talk with people whose positions we detest. Well, we detest or disagree with. Detest, I think, is a rather strong word. It's rather provocative. We disagree with. So hopefully they will listen. Hopefully they will listen to us, and hopefully we will listen to them. And I bring up this point because I'm sure perhaps you've had this experience, regardless of where you're coming from, that you're in a disagreement with someone and you try to explain your perspective without name calling, without using platitudes, without using condescension, only to see that the other person has their arms crossed and is looking away from you. And you can almost see the wheels turning. They're not necessarily listening to what you're saying, but they're thinking of their next riposte. By riposte, I mean their next verbal charge. And so that while they're thinking of their next verbal charge in being with you, they're not listening, or they're not trying to understand your position, because there's a filter up, and that filter is just a one-way filter. Kind of like a filter that's used on alternating current, and that filter or rectifier removes half of the wave. We're removing when we have that attitude of prepping what we're going to say, there's no way we can listen and actually analyze what the other person is saying. So I believe that the professor is on the right path. I just think that Professor Latif, I just think that he needs to be a little bit more straightforward in saying that this is a two-way street, regardless what the issue is. But by the way, there's another picture here of a teenager in the 4th of July parade in St. Johnsbury in Brattleboro, and it says "Rise Up." And I'm not sure what you do with "Rise Up." Actually, the poster that says "Guns are for weirdos" is actually a little bit more telling than "Rise Up." But I do see a couple of older people in the march, and I think we need. I think that depth of expression, of actually looking for independent sources of data, independent perspectives. By independent, I mean not clicking onto, not tuning into a particular channel that is mainstream, but actually fringe or alternate news media. And there's also discrepancies as far as what's accurate and what has been made up as well. But this reminds me, the signs and the students marching reminds me of the early 70s when I was actually their age, and we held up, I don't remember making a sign myself, but my disagreement was expressed otherwise with the war in Vietnam. And the war was going to go on for a couple of more years, and that was the emphasis, that was the main thrust of the agitation, was an end to a war that ultimately would cost 50,000 American lives. I don't know how many South Vietnamese and North Vietnamese, Laotian, Cambodian lives were lost, but quite a few. And that the war was going nowhere. It was just who had the bigger bombs, and even our bigger bombs did not penetrate Viet Cong networks of caves that were used for their supply chain. We talk about our supply chain. Imagine a supply chain that works through a network of tunnels built in the jungles that are impervious to bombs or defoliating agents such as Agent Orange. So I think that especially after the 2 years of separation, students having to go through Zoom calls or virtual or distant remote learning, not being able to have face-to-face conversations as often as they normally would, and also the shift from face-to-face personal contact to digital contact. I think that has put us a bit of a disadvantage in trying to resolve issues face-to-face, and it's very easy digitally, if we disagree with someone through Facebook or Twitter or social media, to leave a nasty comment, especially anonymously. And these nasty comments could do the opposite of resolving conflict. They just throw gasoline on a fire. So we have a couple of things going here. I think social media, while it does have positive attributes, I think more often than not it exasperates lack of communication. It exasperates a feeling of loneliness or separateness from others. I know many suicides have been prompted from messages that have been transmitted through social media, impersonal, very damaging messages. I still don't think we're aware as a society of the full impact of iPhones, of this form of communication, which unfortunately has replaced interpersonal communication and experiences. That, coupled with 2 years of lockdowns, 2 years of distrust of what we've been told as the narrative, the official narrative of what's happening, changes. And then also, going back technology, the fact that we can alter what is true through computer-generated imagery, through voice modification. In other words, if we don't like what has been videoed or recorded as an actual event, we have the capability, a 13-year-old has the capability of creating a virtual reality which has very little to do with the truth. As the truth of me running my hand through Oliver's fur. This image, my audio, can be easily altered so that I'm doing something else, whatever the creator of that something else wishes the message to be. And that's very dangerous. Again, I think these students, it's more difficult to be a conscientious citizen of not just the United States, but of the world, because it's very easy to fall back on technology and our smartphone have an answer to a problem which is decades old and runs deep through emotional chasms, such as the abortion, and come up with a soundbite or a view that happens to be the running narrative carried by whoever is in charge of the news service. And our mainstream media, everything from CNBC, what's that Atlanta group, CNN, National Public Radio, all of these are privately owned news services. And if you look at all of mainstream media, which represents 85% of what we hear or are exposed to, or the information we're bombarded with, whether it's advertising or news, those controlling issues are in the hands of maybe 6 companies worldwide. 6 companies worldwide controlling our news, shaping public opinion. And I think going back to young people, and I remember being their age in the early 70s, very impressionable by what the narrative was, trusting the narrative. And the narrative can be very misleading. Now the narrative can be not only misleading through omission, but misleading through the creation of a parallel reality, which is deceiving. We talked earlier this year about, we read excerpts from George Orwell's 1984, in which the shaping of public opinion, the shaping of what's popular and what isn't, is channeled into a type of sheep population that follows what Big Brother says. And if you don't, then you are singled out and you go to a re-education camp. The type of place that existed in Cambodia under Pol Pot regime, the type of place that existed through the Gulag archipelago in Stalin's Soviet Union, re-education camps in Vietnam after the fall of South Vietnam, and the communists came in from the north, and the re-education camps that exist today in China, where religious dissenters for religious reason or faith-based beliefs are imprisoned. And it's what's good about the technology that we have today is we know about these things because the videos leak out. And sometimes the videos are altered, like the videos coming out of, let's say, news coverage in the Ukraine, the war in the Ukraine. Sometimes it's raw iPhone footage, and we see actual events that have happened halfway around the world within the last 24 hours that have not been censored by the government in control of that area where the film or the video was made. So it's interesting, and it challenges our teenagers to not only make signs, whether it's abortion, reproductive rights, the other side of the coin, Second Amendment rights, or guns are for weirdos, that perspective from one teenager on his sign. And the whole gender issue, it's going to be very important for people to talk with their neighbors, their friends, their enemies, if that's what you want to call someone with an opposing viewpoint. I think with a little bit of deeper thought and critical thinking, research, and having, at least from the outset, empathy for somebody else, empathy for the person in disagreement with the view held, that we can find common cause and not resort to name-calling or not resort to citing somebody whose opinion has been propagated through the media, thanks to their position, thanks to their money, or thanks to the popularity of the current view or the current thing. So I think we can get beyond signs like Rise Up and actually, hopefully, on a local level, and if we can do this on a local level with what's happening in our town, what's happening in our county, and what's happening in our state, that will fan out as a very positive vibe. And it is said that, and this has been proven scientifically through quantum physics, which I couldn't tell you exactly what quantum physics is, but one theory that has been discussed by scientists is if you can get 9,000 people in the world, 9,000 out of a population of 8 billion, just 9,000, to experience, to cultivate an inner peace. In other words, an inner peace where they are, I'm not talking about nirvana, but I'm talking about a balance. They're at peace with themselves, they're at peace with God, and a belief in God is not necessarily a prerequisite, but it certainly helps me, and it certainly helps others to have a faith system, a series of values that kind of keep you in check and give you a good feeling once you have lived those values and you've stuck with them. That if you get 9,000 people that experience inner peace, that sends out a very strong vibe to the world, and it affects the world in a positive way. If you are angry, if you are shaking your fist, if you want to destroy, damage, or bring somebody down, that is not going to resonate and get you where ultimately you want to be, which is a resolution. A level of trust that we can talk and that I don't have to watch my back when you are around. Very important. Or I don't have to worry about what you're saying about me on your smartphone or through Twitter or whatever. In other words, it's trust. And I think because we have been lied to from people in authority, elected or not, for many years, not just the last 2, that a lot of trust in the government is gone. Trust in our news services is gone. When I say gone, I'm saying 80% of the population, I think, no longer even bothers. I know that trust in voting has been taken a bad hit because here in Rockingham, only 40% of the eligible voters bothered to vote in the 2020 presidential election, just 40%. So I think dialogue is very important, as this professor mentioned, and I would take it a little bit further through what I've just said, as far as going deeper and starting from a position of empathy for the person, and the fact that I just want to live my life without interference, without regulation, as long as I don't hurt you, or as long as I don't hurt this beautiful planet on which we live. And I think if we just follow that, live our lives, and be the example we want to see in others, through thoughtfulness, kindness, and just having a sort of inner peace, through meditation, through self-reflection, not too much self-reflection. It's actually better to immerse yourself with other people. You'll feel better, and you'll feel less lonely, less isolated or detached. That will help other people, and I actually think that there will be a beneficial effect on the planet. Not everything is an electric car as far as the environment is concerned, or reducing CO2. There's a lot that we can do through our own psyche and our inner peace that will have a positive effect on Oliver and all the little creatures that keep us company, and sometimes sleep in the same room at night if it's air conditioned. All right, so we're going to leave off there. I hope you found the discussion interesting. I'm sorry I was out of town. I was not able to attend the Brattleboro 4th of July parade. I was also unable to attend the Saxons River 4th of July parade, although there were 2 floats from our Republican Town Committee, from members that live in Saxons River. And so they came up with a very good patriotic theme for the 4th of July Saxons River Parade. And unfortunately, there were some people that had other ideas as far as interrupting others' enjoyment of the holiday and celebrating a little bit of patriotism with flags and the positive that our country represents, the positive that our country has achieved through a very tumultuous 250-year history coming up to. So I think the next 250 years will either be an updating of 1776, or if we just stay on a shallow area and let technology substitute what we feel in our heart and what we think with our brain, we will wind up in 1984. But that's for each of us to decide. I'm going to leave here. There was one part of the article that I did not read. It's a quote from Thomas Jefferson, I'm assuming from Kevin O'Connor, the writer of this piece on Vermont Teens, and it says, "I like the dreams of the future better than the history of the past." Now, I'm not sure if that was taken out of context. I think you cannot prepare for the future unless you have an awareness of the past. Human nature being what it is, being motivated by what is the most attractive, the easiest, the most lucrative, tends to repeat mistakes. And if we don't learn from the mistakes of the past or the successes, things, movements that have created wealth and equality, then we are doomed in the future to repeat those lessons of the past that we have not learned. So I think history is important, not only of this country, but of the rest of humanity that also occupies this planet, lives on this planet beyond our borders. I think knowing our past is important. Also knowing where those borders are, our geography is important. And how we are different and how we are the same. So we're going to end there. And please try to give it some thought. The idea of inner peace being one of the 9,000 people that has reached some level of harmony, not only with yourself, but perhaps with a family, other people that live under the same roof, with animals, even just in taking care of a garden, cultivating plants. There are many levels, many ways of achieving this type of balance and inner peace. And according to quantum physicists, if we can get 9,000 people in the world to experience or reach this inner peace, then we could have a positive effect on the other 8 billion, and it will propagate, just like the waves or the ripples. When a stone is thrown into the water, into a pond, the ripples go out, fan out, and good vibes as well as bad vibes do that, have that ability to move out and touch so many other people. So next week I will be back. We will talk about the 2030 agenda for the World Economic Forum. This agenda is important because the World Economic Forum has a memorandum of agreement. In other words, it's a letter of cooperation that they have with the United Nations. So the United Nations, in other words, as an organization, is on board with the goals of the World Economic Forum. And we will be discussing next Thursday at 5:45 the very deep and long-lasting implications or consequences that this vision or this agenda for 2030 will have for all of us should it go through in its present form. So Oliver and I say, see you later, and have a good weekend, and look forward to being back here again next week. Ciao. Want some water?